All right, let's talk about the invisible rules that shape our lives. In the classroom, at work, everywhere. We're going to dive into one big idea that explains why some social situations feel really formal and strict, while others feel way more casual.
So, have you ever been here? You're in a meeting or a class, you have this fantastic idea, but something just stops you from speaking up. You just can't bring yourself to challenge your manager or your professor. Yeah, we've all felt that. Today, we're going to give that feeling a name and figure out what's really going on.
So, here's our game plan. We'll start with that feeling, that unspoken question. Then we'll decode what power distance actually means. We'll take a close look at Korea, then compare it to another country to see the difference. After that, we'll zoom out to see the bigger picture. And finally, we'll ask if any of this can ever change. Okay, so what's the secret behind that hesitation to speak up? Well, the answer is a really powerful concept from social psychology called power distance.
Now, this is the most important part, so lean in. Power distance is not about powerful people forcing their authority on others. It's actually defined from the bottom up. It's all about how much the people with less power expect and accept that things are unequal. It's a shared belief system. It's about what we all agree is normal.
So, what does this look like in the real world? Well, in a large power distance society, inequality is just normal. It's the way things are. Superiors might feel like they're on a totally different level. But in a small power distance culture, it's the exact opposite. Inequality is seen as something we should try to fix. A boss is just a person with a different job, and a hierarchy is just there to keep things organized. It even shapes how we raise our kids. Do we prioritize respect above all else, or do we push for independence?
Okay, that's the theory. Now let's make this super concrete and talk about a country we all know very well, South Korea.
So researchers actually measure this using something called the Power Distance Index, or PDI. It's a simple scale from 0 to 100. And as you can see, South Korea clocks in at 60. That's a good deal higher than places like the US or Denmark, but not quite as high as, say, Russia. This number is basically a way to put a value on that social distance we were talking about.
So, what does a score of 60 actually feel like? It means that, generally, inequality is just an accepted part of how the world works. Respect for elders and superiors isn't just a nice idea, it's a core value. And at work, this usually means that things are pretty centralized. Employees kind of expect and wait for clear instructions to come down from the boss.
Now, to really understand where Korea stands, it helps a ton to look at the other side of the coin. So let's take a quick trip to Denmark. Wow, look at that difference. 60 versus 18. That is not a small gap, right? This points to a completely different set of unwritten rules about how people should interact and how a society should run.
In Denmark, the whole cultural vibe is about minimizing inequality. Kids are raised to be independent thinkers, bosses are just seen as regular people you can talk to, and they're expected to ask their teams for input, not just bark orders. The whole system is built around discussion and consultation. And believe it or not, this one cultural value doesn't just change how you talk to your boss. It's connected to some of the biggest patterns in an entire society.
Their research shows some pretty mind-blowing connections. Societies with high PDI scores tend to have a wider gap between the rich and poor. Politically, power is often concentrated in the hands of a small group of elites. And get this, when big political changes happen, they're more likely to be sudden, dramatic revolutions instead of slow, gradual reforms. Even in business, you tend to see older executives holding on to their top positions for a lot longer.
This also totally changes something that's super important today: innovation. In high-power distance cultures, a new idea usually has to get the stamp of approval from the top to go anywhere. But in low-power distance cultures, innovation is often messier, more spontaneous. It comes from the mavericks and the rebels who dare to think differently. So all of this leads to a really big question. Are these cultural values just locked in forever? Can a country's power distance actually change?
Well, the researcher who came up with this whole theory, Hofstede, basically said that we learn these values so early in life that they stick with us forever. They're the bedrock of a culture, passed down from one generation to the next. But, that isn't the whole story.
There was this amazing study that looked at two different generations, 30 years apart, and it found something really interesting: a global trend. All over the world, the younger generation had values that leaned more toward a smaller power distance. So it seems like the world as a whole is slowly becoming a bit more equal-minded. But, and this is the absolute key finding, even though every country was changing, their ranking compared to each other barely moved at all.
The high PDI countries got a little lower, and the low PDI countries also got a little lower. It's like a group of swimmers in a race. They all move forward, but they pretty much stay in their own lanes. So while cultures are definitely not stuck, those fundamental differences between them are incredibly sticky.
Okay, let's pull all of this together. If you're gonna remember just a few things from all this, what should they be?
First, remember that power distance comes from the bottom up. It's all about acceptance. Second, this one idea has huge ripple effects, influencing everything from politics to business. And third, culture does change. It's not frozen in time, but the relative differences between cultures are amazingly stable.
And with that, I'll leave you with a couple of questions to think about. Where do you see these power dynamics playing out in your own life here at university? And looking ahead, what do you think are the biggest advantages and maybe the biggest challenges of Korea's PDI score in today's world? Understanding these unspoken rules is the first step. Thanks for tuning in,